I've heard a lot of people say just do it and get caught, like get big enough to get sued. I don't necessarily think that's a good approach, especially when it comes to AI, because that's a totally different beast.
You've been in the industry for 20 years. In that journey, what do you think the music industry is getting wrong?
Oh man.
Meet Ryan Hamilton, founder of Catalog Management Services. He drives multi-million-dollar deals, licensing strategies, and digital growth for some of the world's most iconic catalogs, helping music investors, labels, and artists turn passive catalogs into active revenue.
Sometimes I fall in love with some of the owners, some of the passion that they have. So I've done deals even in the past year that I said, listen, let's do a 1-year deal and let's renegotiate next year after we get some data behind you. I want to see you succeed. I think this is a cool thing you're doing. So I've done them as low as 0, but with some guardrails.
So there are going to be independent artists listening to this podcast. What do you have to do to register your works to make sure that it's optimized?
Step 1.
Ryan, how does it feel to work for yourself?
It's interesting. I can tell you that. I think time management is everything, right? And it's one of those things where I'm trying to figure out like the entire workflow of spending time between client acquisition in terms of business development outreach and working and networking versus, okay, I do have good clients and I want to kill it for them. So let's get creative. And I think wearing both of those hats is definitely tough. So I think that's where I'm in this space right now. Where working for yourself is fantastic, especially when you're in like the publishing music tech community in general. Everyone's super supportive. So I think it's one of those things where it's like I get to still work with all the same great people. And it's just now like, how do I expand on that and try to create like the same value as I did with just one company across many companies.
You never had to carve out business development time for yourself in the past, huh?
No, I did. It's just, it's one of those things where it's like now it's like if you fail, it's on you, right? I think it's like the little bit more leeway when it comes to, like you hope you're gonna always bat 1,000. And I think it's just one of those things where I've always kind of felt like I've succeeded in the drowning in the deep end a bit. So it's interesting to see like how I'm going to do that. And I think working on like, when I'm working on the publishing side, it's a lot easier to like get good clients when you have great compositions. When you're working with, some of the top artists in the world, it's a lot easier for someone to come to you and want to have a conversation. And we're on the pitching side of the deal, it's like your value proposition is a little bit different because you're trying to get someone to open their wallet.
So
Yeah.
hold on a second. How did you get to be in a position where you're working with some of the top artists in the world?
I mean, I've been working in the music business for almost 20 years now. Anywhere from like starting in A&R, was working in ticket sales at Live Nation for a long time. So I've always kind of been around a lot of artists and then shifting into more of like the brand area. And I think when I went into publishing, I didn't realize I was gonna be working with top artists because I really wanted to work with songwriters. And the music tech community has actually allowed me to really work with top artists because it's like combining doing really cool deals and getting music on great platforms and also tying it through like, oh, this is great. So I think it's just a matter of right place, right time. I don't know. I think it's one of those things where I've always strived to work for top companies, and I think some of the best indie publishers have a lot of good representation.
What is it about music tech that enables your job description? And in answering that, maybe you can tell us or elaborate more on what it is exactly that you do.
Oh yeah. So music platforms are popping up constantly. I think within the past 10 years, it's exploded in terms of really cool gaming platforms, whether it's e-learning or whether it's a distribution channel like a Spotify in general. So those platforms all want all the top music. They want to have the best representation because that'll bring in users, which brings in subscriptions from users and allows them all to thrive as a business. So my position is to one, look out for the catalogs I represent. So not all these music tech platforms are created equal. Some may make sense for us since like this is a no-brainer, and some actually may not make sense for the roster I'm working with. And my purpose is to one, make sure that the writers I represent or even the artists I represent are getting top-notch royalties. They're protected in terms of maybe an MFN within the agreement. I'm clearing a roster of songs or compositions to be able to potentially be cleared to go onto a platform for use. My ultimate role really is to make sure that they're getting their fair share, and I represent them as much as they hope that I'm looking out for their best interests. So that's what I try to do.
Okay, so your clients are the rights holders. We'll call them like the music publishing companies or the record labels. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And what's the split between publishers and more the recorded music side as far as your client base?
The majority of my client base is, well, it's actually shifted actually in the past few months, but I would say it's almost 50-50 right now. I think there's more compositions that I represent, maybe a few 100,000, whereas maybe on the sound recording side or the masters, I represent somewhere between 5 and 10,000. Now, in terms of masters, typically are owned 100%, where publishing, you're talking about partial shares. So in terms of, I think, revenue, I think we're looking at relatively even keel. And that's like how, when we do a deal, typically it's whether you're talking about masters in general or you're talking about publishing rights. The hard part is on the consultants and the lawyers, really, and even the tech platforms in general, because they don't have to just clear with me. They have to go get 100% clearance, and they have to may go to some of my other friends in the publishing industry and say, "Hey, I have 80% of this song. You have the other 20. We have to do a deal here." So they have a lot more hard work than I think I do at this point because they're kind of hustling around the industry to make sure that they're not, infringing on any copyrights as well.
Okay, so you're saying that a Spotify, for instance, in addition to going around to every label, including the majors and the indies, they've got to go to all the publishing companies and say, we need your support as well. If there's any holdouts, then the music does not end up on the platform. Is that true?
Spotify is a bad example
Okay.
because of the fact that DSPs in general are compulsory. They're managed through the MLC. So those royalties and rights have been negotiated already. So they need a DSP notice to be able to go on those streaming platforms. But for the non-Section 115 type of platforms, so we're talking audiovisual, on demand, those types of
TikTok.
uses.
Just say it. TikTok.
Sure, TikTok, exactly. TikTok, Facebook, Instagrams of the world. Those are the people who are actually hustling. There's a lot of money involved too, because you would think that they typically have to come up with a decent amount of money up front as an advance to be able to have access to the repertoire that they're looking to get.
So if you've been on Musical.ly or TikTok anytime in the last 10 years and you've used your sound and your video went viral and then all of a sudden you found out that it was muted, it was largely because somebody like you's on the other end who hasn't gotten
Yeah.
the deal done yet. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess so. That could, yeah. You'd hope to think that. I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to build a library internally, a lot of these platforms. So this way, the users, when they're creating content, are going to leverage that library and not kind of bring something in. But there obviously are ways for people who are generating content to create it, out of the box and bring it in, and it can get muted.
So Musical.ly, which became TikTok, very famously like shot first and asked for forgiveness later in this regard. They were just like,
Yeah.
we're just going to go use all the music. We're going to become huge. And then we're going to just like explain to people that they have to be on our platform. And it worked.
Absolutely.
What's your advice to a tech founder out there who might have that strategy in 2025?
It's kind of interesting. Like, I've heard a lot of people say, just do it and get caught, like get big enough to get sued. And I don't necessarily think that's a good approach, especially when it comes to AI, because that's a totally different beast. I don't think it's the right thing to do, because only for the relationship purpose, because now if you're actually settling on something, now you've kind of pissed off a lot of people. And now you're not only negotiating a go forward deal, you're actually trying to negotiate a settlement, which comes with penalties. And that's typically what I'll look to do, is say, hey, listen, like, I really want to work with you guys. You're a great, you seem really great, but you didn't really go about doing the right way. So we're going to have to figure that relationship out now. So it's more about building the relationship with the industry. Do you care or not? And then if you don't care, then it may not work out for you anyway, right? So it's kind of it's a weird question, because honestly, a few years ago, I heard people in the industry like even giving bad advice to say, you just want to get big enough to get sued. And it's like, absolutely not. Like, at this point, do it the right way, or even create a sandbox, like go after maybe a really small subset of music and do it right to get the proof of concept. As soon as the proof of concept happens, then, maybe you'll be able to do some fundraising. And at that point you can hire the right, consultants or lawyers. That there's, a handful of them that kind of have the industry in a good place, that there's probably 10 names you can say that would be like, those are the go-tos. They have a great relationship. They'll get it done.
So in the live music space, if you're trying to book talent and you're not on the map, a startup festival, you're a new promoter, you're a new venue, right? The price is high for you.
Sure.
But if you're
Pay to play.
established and you're the biggest festival in the world, or you're the biggest promoter and you have, muscle and leverage, you get the better price. Is that the same thing?
I believe so. Yeah, I think that it's really hard to bootstrap. I would think that when it comes to actually going to the majors, the price point is in the millions to be able to, like, as a starting point. I don't necessarily agree with that approach. I think that I wish that there was, and honestly, there's been conversations about it within like the publishing community in terms of coming up with that rate card for startups. Like, we want more of these platforms out there. And I've always been kind of empathetic to these platforms. I'm like, man, this thing would have been great if you got it out a year ago, but it took you 3 years or 2 years or a year just to get, the money to raise it. And then most of them kind of die on that hill. And some of my old coworkers, when we were doing kind of startup consulting, we used to say, are you prepared to die on this hill? We knew exactly what it was going to cost. So I think that to me, it's like, it's never, you may not have to have the approach of going directly to the majors first, which I think a lot of people direct say, hey, go do this. But I personally would say, look at what your platform is doing or what you want to accomplish on this platform. Maybe there's 100 songs. That's it. That would actually make you successful. A lot of e-learning platforms that are out there, they maybe have 50 songs that they've surrounded themselves around. They don't need to have millions of songs available to them. And when they get big enough, they will want that because they want the freedom to create whatever content they want to grow their user base and to keep them interested long term. But that's the idea, is like, you can start small and actually be successful and be a bit more, sleek about it, as opposed to just saying, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want.
So you're representing publishers and you're licensing catalogs in bulk. Like, this is a group of songs and we're going to license it to somebody. Of course, there is a business in this industry where a show, on HBO might come and license a single song from someone. That's totally separate from what you do, right?
Yes. Yeah. I consider it like digital sync. I think sync, which is what you're referring to in terms of like films and TV shows and commercials, it's still sync because you're putting a piece of music to a piece of audio visual typically, but we call it like digital sync. So the deals are kind of the same, but there's definitely nuances in terms of the deal points, like terms and that type of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the threshold in like amount of money that someone would need to come to you to like get your attention? Like, are you doing deals in like the $10,000 range for something for a client, or is it like six figures or more is required in order to get someone like you to kind of negotiate a deal?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's like sometimes I fall in love with some of the owners, some of the passion that they have, and like, I think it's a cool idea, and I know that I don't necessarily want them to get beaten up by me because I know they're getting beaten up down the street. So I've done deals even in the past year that I said, listen, let's do a 1 year deal and let's renegotiate next year after we get some data behind you. I want to see you succeed. I think this is a cool thing you're doing. So I've done them as low as zero, but with some guardrails, right? Whereas most of them are, the bigger ones can be in, the high, multiple, six-figure deals is pretty standard. But there is actually a really big spread between the ones that can get that can justify, the bigger advance or minimum guarantee versus the rest of the pack. I would say the majority of them are on the lower end of the spectrum. Maybe there's probably about 5 of them in the industry that really are the ones that a publishing company or a label are going to really focus on making sure they get the best value out of that deal.
What's the difference for you when representing a frontline publishing client? These are folks who are out there, they're signing new writers, they're, shopping records, they're doing the whole thing, versus private equity who comes in, they buy catalog, and then they hire someone like you to go optimize it. Like, what's the difference like in that day to day for you?
Day to day, it's interesting. So, well, we're opening up a can of worms here. So, I personally love working with songwriters and working with copyright owners and all the people who are actually, representing frontline new music that are coming out. It's a different beast because it's timely. So there's opportunities that you may want to make sure that there's a whole team surrounding. Hey, we're coming out with a new release. Oh, there's a sync tied to it. How do we build a marketing plan around that release? Am I pitching this to Facebook? Am I pitching this to CapCut or Canva? What can I build around this release or even a sync that's happening around a new release? So it's a little bit of a different beast in terms of like, it's exciting in a different way. Whereas backline, which is typically what you see being acquired, whether it's from a strategic buyer or a non-strategic buyer is kind of how we like to separate it. Private equity being a non-strategic buyer, meaning that they're buying it because they see it as an asset class as opposed to growing your market share in the industry. Whereas a strategic buyer is actually going to buy a catalog to add on to the value of maybe their frontline business as well. It's kind of like a middle ground. The approach there is actually, there's a bunch of ways to approach it from the jump, but there's a lot of historic deals that are in place when you look at something that's been acquired. And it's always interesting to look at what's in place, how they would like to approach it. If it's a masters or publishing is kind of completely different workflow. But I think that when something's acquired, I always say there's no such thing as a passive catalog. And the initial approach, I think, has been that, a private equity is getting in the space, or there's a lot of acquisitions going on in general. And maybe they just look at it like, hey, look, there's great streaming coming from this. We can recoup our money, and this is really great for, our earnings. Whereas, man, I think that if I made a couple tweaks to some of the deals you have in place, or even just held accountability to some of your partners, we can actually, as opposed to seeing a steady decline over time, we'll actually see like maybe a steady state or even like an increase in certain areas. So it's completely different worlds.
So if you're selling your catalog, is it safe to say that you'll probably get more money from the private equity buyer, but fewer services? And if you're really like interested in the longevity of your legacy, that you might want to go with a strategic who's going to nurture, invest, and stuff like that. Am I thinking about that correct?
I don't think it's a bad thought. I personally, from my experience right now, I think that a lot of the backline is overlooked in general, just across the board. I do think that there's a lot more resources from the strategic buyers because they have a music industry team or a business that's a music industry business surrounding it. Whereas typically the team that surrounds a private equity firm or a bank is not in place, which ultimately is where I come in with some of my partners, where I can actually help them from the outside in. One, have the network to be able to help them navigate the music business and their partners, and to even just kind of liaison between their partners and help them. How do we optimize this deal? And those people, I think, actually may care a little bit more in terms of optimization because they have no other options. Where maybe internally at a bigger music company, they're like, we have everything we can do here. We will handle it. And I think the biggest plus side, if you're working with someone like me or some of the guys that I've partnered with, is that we actually value artist relations a lot too, where we don't want them to feel like they're selling out. They understand that the owner is the owner now, but the biggest value add is really having that continued relationship long term and making sure that they know that I don't necessarily need approval, but I'm like, let's have a conversation. What do you like? What you don't like? I want you to post this on your Instagram. I want you to maybe sign a couple of copies of this new vinyl I'm releasing. There's some really cool advantages of keeping the artist involved. So I'm running away from the question, but I think that when it comes to backline, it's very hard to judge whether or not there's anything's going to happen after the sale. But I do think that probably you're right when it comes to private equity. They may actually be willing to pay a little bit more money. Maybe they're better at math. I don't know.
Is that true though? So if you're selling your publishing and it's acquired by whether it be strategic or whether it be non-strategic, are you giving away everything? Like you have no skin in the game after that? Or is it like even a royalty gets kicked back to you or what?
I think there's every option's on the table. It really depends on the artist. Some it's a complete buyout and you get all the different types of rights, like physical rights or digital distribution rights. And then I've seen it where maybe there's a third party approval on certain areas. Maybe they retain physical rights. Maybe they retain producer rights. It depends on how comfortable they feel and how, if they feel like they just want to completely step away from those works because they're focusing on the future, and they're building something new with their brand or, in general, or whether or not they actually understand like, hey, I would need to be involved moving forward. We've done both. And I think I love the idea of having a little bit of skin in the game. It can like obviously slow things down when you're kind of just moving and grooving and you want to just kind of say, oh, I got this cool thing and I'm going to do this gaming deal or something, where typically like I would love to just say, yeah, it's approved, but getting the buy-in from the artist is always paramount. And likely is going to make it more successful.
Is it the same set of relationships on your side, whether you're trying to, or whether you're being approached about publishing rights versus master, or on the other side of the equation, is it like two different departments of people who are purchasing or licensing, I should say?
Yeah, I don't think they're not mutually exclusive at all. I think that there's a lot on the market in general. There's certain companies that I've seen now that say, hey, we actually invest only in indie record labels, and that's like their niche because they've built their infrastructure around it. Some of my partners are heavy into masters, sound recordings in general, and even looking at, I think the most promising, I think, investment is when you look at when they're acquiring both sides of the coin here, when you're acquiring masters and publishing. Now you're a one stop. So now anytime someone wants to license that single song, you're the single point of contact, which actually they probably, it's really nice and easy for anyone that's actually trying to do work with you.
Okay, so you're representing clients from all around the industry. And I'm sure in your career, you've had this experience where like something happens, like it's like a Fleetwood Mac situation or like a Cranberries situation. Talk us through the day to day. What goes on?
Yeah, typically, I mean, it really comes down to if you own the masters, say, I think it comes down to having a really good distributor, someone who's actually tracking all of that. If you have a team in house that's tracking social media content and seeing what's going viral, I guess there's different approaches either way, but you want to catch that wave for sure. Because as soon as that happens, that definitely all hands on deck, exactly to your point, is okay, guys, there's something really big culturally going on, which I think is the most important thing to say is like if there's a cultural relevance happening right now, then we need to come up with a quick strategy to get that out into the world. It will automatically turn into sync opportunities. It will turn into other opportunities for you. Obviously, the immediate thing that's going to happen just naturally when something goes viral, you'll be able to look at streaming, and the playlists jump up, the streaming goes up, and you can kind of track all of that activity. I think naturally, if something cultural happens, it's almost like get ready, and also like what can you do proactively? Sending out playlists, to all of my partners. Like I have a distribution list of, different types of partners. And I know the sync teams I work with, they have their distribution list where we'll constantly notify everyone. This is happening in the space right now. Make sure you tell all of your clients that we're actually a partial owner or we own this piece of work. Chances are they'll notice that something's happening too. And like, oh, I was just thinking about that song. Yeah, let's have a conversation.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying that you're going to get a lot of inbound from all the attention that people want around the cultural moment, but then you also got to put a plan together, hustle that outbound, and make sure everybody knows that you're the one representing this and that they can call you and then that there's deals to be done.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if I'm different than anyone else, but I've always kind of valued myself as someone who's super proactive. Like get on LinkedIn, get on your distribution list, email like all of your partners and do whatever you can outward. And that maybe that goes down to the fact that when we talked about a bigger company purchasing your catalog, right? Like maybe their team is doing something, but do they have a dedicated person that actually can go do that? Or actually, maybe if you're working with maybe a more boutique partner that actually is like, okay, I see this happening. I actually can make moves pretty quickly. There's not as much red tape. And I think that, yes, it's super important to be as proactive as possible because I think there's a lot of missed opportunities. As I dig deeper into new catalogs like every day, it's very interesting to see like, oh man, we missed that 10-year anniversary. We could have actually leveraged that to their fan base that would actually probably buy something from us. Whereas if you let it go, it's just kind of it can just kind of go into the ether.
So if you're an artist manager or you're an A&R and you hear something or you experience something or something cultural starts to bubble, you reach out to the representatives of the artist and you try to insert yourself. That's how that business works. In your case, if you hear something or see something that's bubbling in like, the cultural zeitgeist, and you kind of like know already, or you've done your research and you realize that it's like a private equity company who owns this, are you actively reaching out to these people to present your services, to ask if they have somebody who's doing digital sync and that type of thing? I mean, are you putting your A&R hat on in that way?
Not as much right now. I think eventually I'll probably reverse engineer what you're saying right now. I think right now what I look at is when I see something happening culturally, it's like, what do we have? Like, partial ownership or we own this master. What can we do with this and what's the game plan? And it's like, who are all of our partners that we work with regularly, whether it's a team, or whether it's our distributor, or whether it's any of the, the music tech partners that we have, and say, like, Peloton, for example. If we have a big piece of catalog and they're having a cultural moment, it would be great to have a ride in Peloton, right? It'd be great because they have a lot of users and they'll use it. And it makes sense right now because everyone's listening to that music. So I'm not reverse engineering it. It's definitely a really good idea. So
How many users does Peloton have these days?
I'm not sure. I don't. I think it's declining a little bit, but I do think that they are definitely the leader still in the the e-fitness or the fit tech community. And I do like what they're doing in terms of like actually encouraging their riders now actually to like really engage with the music. So I think it's evolving for sure.
Cool. So private equity investment in catalog has been a trend now going on 10 years or more.
Yeah,
Are these guys making money?
the ones who are getting smart in the idea that there's no passive catalog, that they should be working what they can work. There's certain rights that are relatively passive. I think that there's always optimization to be had, and those who are prioritizing optimization are the ones who are actually making bigger, having bigger results for when eventually they will resell, likely, depending on their structure. I think the strategic buyers will never sell, and the non-strategic buyers, their plans typically, I think, to sell at some point. So the goal is to keep it alive. I think they're making money for sure, and I think it really depends on what's the status of the catalog you're purchasing when you receive it, and do you have the team prepared to go and dissect it? Like, do you have the Navy SEALs ready to go in there and kind of go through the bushes and find some of the diamonds in the rough, or do you have someone that's 100% focused on that key piece of work that will actually grow? But if it just kind of sits there, then yeah, I think that they're probably going to make money regardless, but it's just not going to recoup as fast. It's all proximity, right? So the more you do with it during the time period you want to keep it, the greater the value goes up on that piece of work or the entire catalog. And at that point, definitely, it's like no one wants to be. I don't think any of them want to be considered like a house flipper, because I think that that's insensitive, and I don't think any of them really think that way. Most of the guys I'm talking to are actually super passionate about the music and actually love it, and they want to build relationships stronger with the artists and their partners. Yeah, I think it's a bad analogy, but that's kind of a little bit of a little bit of what it is. So I do think that there's definitely a lot of money being made here for sure.
There's a lot of turnover in the music business going on lately. Are you seeing people, with multi-decade careers in the music business leave to go join these private equity companies to represent these catalogs, to be those, I forget what you said, Navy SEAL ninja type people who are going to
Yeah.
kind of like dive in and get that done? I mean, because I don't think that can be done by like a kind of outsider, right?
I always kind of make the point to say that if you are a bank or an investment firm investing in masters, that you are a label, right? They don't ever think they're a label, but they are. And then on the opposite side, if you are that same type of person investing in publishing rights, that you're actually a publisher. So in the very least, they have to build the infrastructure. Whether or not they want to bring it in-house or not is a different question. So to your point, I do think that it makes sense for them to build teams eventually, but I would hope to think that I would likely think that there would be groups of people like myself who would likely either be all friends and kind of working together, and hey, Ryan, you're really good at doing business development, you go do this. Hey, I got this sync guy over here. I have someone who's an admin consultant. I have someone who's a financial analyst consultant. Maybe we start kind of teaming up. So I think that it's definitely going to become more popular for sure.
What are people in this market getting right about the music industry?
I think that we're embracing more of different platforms that are actually helping us expand on the operation. I think the traditional tools that they had, I think that I don't want to say one that comes to mind, but there's one that comes to mind that's actually like, it'll crash every time you try to use it. Whereas I think there's a lot of tools, especially for like the independent community, where they are nimble enough to say, hey, let's try something new and let's build this different infrastructure, whether it's like an Airtable type solution, or whether it's whether they're using some sort of AI to actually like dissect what they have in their catalog to quickly pitch something, and not you can never know 20, 30, 40, 50,000 tracks in your catalog. I don't care how good you are, right? So I think what they're doing right is actually embracing new tools, and there's so many coming out. So it is almost like too much sometimes, but I always love, tackling those and kind of meeting with everybody to see like, oh, I could use this. Let me try it out.
I agree with you 100%. I
Yeah.
feel like the music industry is as quick as anyone else to say this is worth a shot. Let's give this a try. Let's keep this, guardrails on, but let's go. And I think
Absolutely.
that kind of AI is a good example. We're not talking about AI music. We're talking about like AI and like your systems and operations and stuff like that. But also, systems development using some of the low code stuff that kind of like you and I have done together. But it's in stark contrast to 10 years ago, right? I'm starting a music marketing agency in 2015, and I'm basically telling everyone that, like, they need to be on Musically and we need to kind of get these deals done. And they're like, wait a minute, we're taking our music off Musically. And I'm like, that's short sighted. It's a marketing opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't that long ago that was like the mentality. And if you look back, even 2013 and 12 and 11, it's like, Spotify is the next big thing. It's going to save the industry. It's going to like replace the digital download. And then you've got people like Tom York and David Byrne screaming from the rooftop saying the music industry is dead and over because of it. And that I think is not happening. There's not so many detractors, and folks are way more willing to embrace the frontier, in my opinion. So I think that's a really good answer. But you know what I'm going to ask next? I'll give you half a second to think. What do you think the music industry is getting wrong in 2025, 26?
Oh man, I've been going to conferences like regularly for like over 10 years, and I feel like we talked about metadata for like every year for the past 10 plus years because of all the change. And I just don't understand how there's not some like collective at this point where we're all getting on some blockchain to figure it out. There's a lot of great matching tools. Like there's every partner has a matching tool. There's a lot of great data sources that are out there, but there's not like a one fix all centralized world. This is the owner of this person, where I understand that if we fix that though, there's a lot of companies that would probably go out of business because their special sauce is actually going and putting those two pieces together to figure out who owns what. Yeah, metadata, man. It's just like it's been the kind of the bane of my existence, honestly, for the past few months. Realizing it's hard to move forward with certain things I want to do in terms of growing certain catalogs I'm working with right now because of lack of metadata. And it's not even to the fault of the owner at this point. I think that even DSPs add on new metadata as like, oh, now we need something else. We need like a producer information, or we need to know these genres that are associated with the, tags. So the metadata keeps on evolving, but we haven't actually fixed the center point of where it started.
But if you're the metadata and rights matching company right now that you said
Yeah.
might be on the chopping block if someone figures out the blockchain, and you go
Yeah.
down because of that, it's kind of on you, right? Like if you're the leading company in that space, you should be the one that embraces technology and goes out and creates the better mousetrap for people to do this better using, you said blockchain, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Wouldn't you agree that those folks should be out there?
They should be out there. And, I've always like loved the idea of competition, so it's hard to like tell them like everyone kind of get simpatico here and share each other's data. I know there's a lot of companies that do share data here and there, like if, depending on if you're, managing mechanical rights versus PRO rights, maybe there's, different information here and there. But I would think that at some point someone's going to say enough is enough, and who's actually collecting the most data. And I would assume that anyone who's being proactive in that race is likely going to end up top. And maybe we end up with like two or three at the end of the day. And there's not a ton of them out there, but and also I think when you talk about world rights, it gets really complicated. So maybe it's a territory-based situation. I know the MLC is doing a great job in terms of helping black box money get out the door and, educating people on how to register your music. I think if there's one thing I would love to try to accomplish at some point is, what's it, 99% of the industry is independent artists. And I would say the majority of them do not know how to register their music. There may be something we can do along like workflows when you're doing distribution that can say, oh, by the way, if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, we're not going to allow you to put your music on Spotify. There's got to be something that we can do to actually continue to enhance metadata as a so rights holders get paid, and it's more complete.
Okay, so there are going to be
Yeah,
independent artists listening to this podcast.
sure.
Without going into the details, what's the checklist? Like, what do you have to do to register your works to make sure that it's optimized? The 1, the 2, the 3, the
Sure.
4.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously, first, like, get your PRO license, decide whether you're not going to ASCAP or BMI. The other ones, for an independent are likely off the table because they're, invite only, but ASCAP or BMI, register your music with a PRO. Step one. When it comes to mechanical rights and streaming royalties, I would say Harry Fox Agency, but you can kind of get to the point if you go straight to the MLC, which most people don't even know about the Mechanical Licensing Collective. That's another way for you to register your music. And honestly, I think that from there, like, you got a good chance of actually, really tying down all of your rights, because all of the DSPs right now get paid through the MLC.
Excellent. Excellent answer. So there's a gap in the market. You're not in corporate anymore. You're on your journey. I feel like there's a thread for you to continue on this path, represent the largest catalogs in the world, put the wins on the board while in the background thinking about how you're going to be the one that's going to solve these issues. Is that on the roadmap for you? Like, where's your company in 5 years? Do you have that figured out, or is it too early?
No, I think it's a little early, but I mean, there's a handful of highways that I'm looking down right now. I'm trying to like figure out how I can kind of traverse all of them. I definitely want to be in the independent space, like working with publishers. I think that's like I love songwriters in general, so I think that's like my wheelhouse for sure. Optimizing and helping backline catalogs not kind of go you know, to their graves from, selling, supporting, the longevity of catalogs with buyers. And then honestly, like, because I have the passion for development and creating workflows and that, I think that I for sure will likely end up developing something at some point. I'm working on something right now, which is pretty interesting, but it's a little too early. And I'm also like, teaming up with a couple other AI based companies right now that are interesting to me just to stay in like the tech mind and like the builder version of me. So it's I guess we'll see where it goes.
Okay, so we've talked about your core clients. We've talked about, you just mentioned an AI business that you're kind of consulting to, it sounds like. And then you've got this other thing that you're not talking about quite yet. Who is your target client right now? And the answer is, about your passion, but also about you got to keep the lights on and you got to bring in the revenue. Like, who are you targeting right now? Who might be listening?
Yeah, right now it's mostly, bankers and private equity funds that are investing in rights. That to me is a very is honestly the most infant place where I think I can make the most damage and in a good way for them. And I think also, just to my point before, I would love to work with more publishing companies and help create maybe a bigger collective of publishers to help them actually achieve better rights, better royalties, and better rates for deals that they want to be in.
Got it. Excellent. All right. So, where do people find you? How do they book a call?
LinkedIn, yeah. Catalogmgmt.com is my website. It's pretty basic right now. There's information on there. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. I pretty much live there. So if someone pings me on LinkedIn, we'll have a call within a week for sure.
Excellent. We'll throw that in the show notes. Ryan, it's been awesome. Always learning,
Thanks, Max.
about the frontier with you. I appreciate it. Stay on for a debrief, and we'll hopefully bring you back for part 2 once you're able to talk about the super secret venture that you're working on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.